last week I got an email from a listener, watcher, viewer named Willie Chen, and Willie wanted to know more about the difference between a double lift and a double turnover. And it occurred to me that if Willie asked this question, it's likely that there's a lot of you that have the same question, but just haven't asked it. So it seems to me like it's an incredibly useful question and something we ought to talk about sooner rather than later. So the short answer is very, very simple. The difference between a double lift and a double turnover is just what you might imagine. This is a double lift. You lift the card and show it. Then the card is taken, placed on the table or on someone's hand, and then it, of course, changes in this context. The double turnover, which is what you see far more often, is slightly different. In this case, you turn the card over on top of the deck once, then you turn it back over, and then you continue as with the double lift to place the card where it's going to go, and of course, it can change. Now that's enough for the basic definition. You're probably wondering what that has to do with you and why we should really care, and is that just a semantic, nitpicky distinction, or is it a real one? Well, if you're just getting started in card magic, this couldn't be really any more interesting or important. This is about as heavy as it gets. It's like this. If you're watching these videos, it's very, very likely that you're in the no man's land, somewhere between Magic's first blush, where you start to do a trick or two, you have some success in it, and it goes great, and then you get super interested in Magic, and all of a sudden you start to realize that there is such a thing as beginner's luck. And once you start to try and duplicate that magical experience every single time, and you try and learn a lot of techniques and tricks and effects, it starts to get a lot less reliable. You start to have a lot of fear a lot of times. Am I using the right method? Am I using the wrong method? Is this going to work? And then there's all the times that you either get caught or people suspect you of doing things, or all those times when it's not in that 10 to 20% of the times where it goes really great, and it's not in that 10 to 20% of the time when you completely bomb and die and it falls apart, but it's somewhere in that middle ground where you're never quite sure how magical the show was and what you can do to make it awesome. And on the other side of that no man's land, there's a place where you're not always comfortable, and you're not only comfortable and confident that you can deceive the audience, but you're literally just happy to be working all the time and doing the sleight of hand because you know it's going to go great and you're going to get the desired result. And a great deal of traversing that no man's land has to do with learning these little distinctions between different moves and really learning what's the right tool for a given problem. And so for that reason alone, really understanding the difference between the double lift and the double turnover and when you should consider using each one is a course of study that you really need to pick up if you want to become a great or even good card magician. So the first important distinction, I think, about the double lift and the double turnover is that you're going to find them confused in print and in your lessons all the time. Because while they're going to always pretty much say use a double lift, use a double lift, use a double lift, then you're going to be taught or instructed to use a double turnover. So that's a complete red flag that wherever you're learning your magic from in this particular instance might be a little bit fishy. So if you think you're learning from a source or video or an instructor that doesn't seem to think there's a distinction between a double lift and a double turnover, that's the first thing you want to pay attention to, because maybe the person hasn't examined or designed their magic very carefully or doesn't really necessarily know what they're talking about. Second, the important thing, I think, is that the double lift is much, much simpler. Simpler to get away with, simpler to use, and much easier. It's the first thing you should learn. So the double turnover, by comparison, is much more complex. The double turnover, what it allows you to do that the double lift doesn't allow you to do, is it allows you to leave the card on the face of the deck or on the top of the deck for an extended period of time. And that is such a useful thing that for a lot of reasons, that's what you find in 80% of the tricks that people publish and design and use, and that's what you'll be instructed to use a lot of the time. But if you pay attention and focus on the tricks that you're learning, you'll probably discover that at least 50% of the time you're instructed to use a double turnover, it's completely unnecessary, and a simple couple-step double lift, show the card, hold out your hand, change the card, a very simple process will be just as easy to do. So my advice to you is, if you're just getting started out, focus on learning the double lift. Keep it very simple. Change the wrong card to a right card. Do a small, ambitious card routine. Experience the joy of a simple, easy, wonderful double lift instead of jumping right in and learning the double turnover just because that's what you're instructed to do in the DVD. Now, on the other hand, if you're confident with the double lift, you sort of understand how it works, and you're ready to move forward and begin really getting into the intricacies of sleight of hand and learning step by step the things that you're going to need to know if you are going to really create beautiful, elegant sleight of hand magic, now you need to begin to take a very serious look at the double turnover. Now, the double turnover is a much, much more complex thing than the double lift, but it's also much more complex than most of the people who use it seem to think it is. The double turnover is going to be, for most of you, the most important, most reliable, most constantly used switch that you ever encounter. And the problem with it is, if you do the double turnover okay, or in a just get by kind of fashion, like the way you see a lot of fellows do it, where they'll just sort of, hey, hold out your hand, and they just whip it around like this, you can get away with that. And you can think that you're having a success. But one of the things that will happen to you is you'll find that that kind of technique for the double will literally erode as you perform it. So you can perform it and get away with it once or even twice, but if you're going to start to perform magic for people for more than 5 or 6 minutes, you'll begin to find that the level of distraction and unnaturalness attended in that basic handling that I just whipped through and showed you will begin to have a serious deleterious effect on the overall effect of your magic. So, basically, the double turnover is so important, it has to be handled very, very carefully. When my students study the double lift, we go through somewhere between 8 and 10 discrete, separate steps designed to make sure that when you actually get to the double turnover itself, it's completely not only undetectable, but well above suspicion as well.